Hello, I wanted to introduce my guest speaker. Her name is Cory Hageman. She's I call it a podcast sensation. So if you ever see or watch her podcast on Cory.fit, it's excellent, very informative. You learn a lot. Okay, so especially women, men too, but especially women. If they have any questions, it's her topics is to the point. So anyway, I wanted to introduce you to Cory, and she did my seminar at my contest. And again, so glad to meet you. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Alan. Like you shared with the listeners and viewers, I did the seminar yesterday, and that was so much fun. Really appreciative for you having me out. I'm a IFBB bikini pro. I've been in this space really in bodybuilding for about 10 years. I've been coaching for almost the same amount of time. But really what I'm doing right now is helping answer questions, helping provide information, and not even necessarily directing people to make decisions around where they want to take their competition career relative to supplementation and PED use. But ultimately, that is where a lot of the conversation goes with my audience. So I think, what we were talking about off camera is there's a lot of people who have been in the sport a while, but with the evolution specifically around the female divisions in bikini and even, wellness, there has been a massive growth in the amount of competitors in these divisions and the level of competition. It's evolved to something that now is, wellness kind of just started off looking, honestly, very enhanced. But bikini in the last 5 years has evolved into a look that, for one, I think is very unrealistic to attain naturally at the higher levels. So what do? I share information around that so that users can be more informed if they do make decisions around PEDs.
Exactly. So I ran across Cory's stories, or I said her feed, just by chance. And slowly I've been just watching your feed, and I learned a lot. Yeah, so it was
Amazing.
very interesting, and from there I kind of started my own by accident. But it's so the reason why I brought you down is because I think it'll give more insight on especially women in Hawaii, what they're looking for in the future, or what they need to do maybe. And by you providing this information, they can do it maybe in a safer way. Or sometimes when you go into things blindly and not knowing why goes this or why goes that, it becomes very hard. But when you understand the whole process, you understand what's going on, it makes it much easier. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really hard to make an informed decision if you're not informed. And a lot of these drugs, a lot of these supplements, even ones that are over the counter have risk. When you look at DHEA, that's something that a lot of women are turning to and just putting in place, it's going to help you build muscle, it's going to help you lose fat. But without understanding what that can do to other hormones downstream, they can have effects that ultimately are unwanted. And not so much DHEA, it's the non-over-the-counter supplements that I think a lot of people stumble into. Would you agree?
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
Very much. So since we're talking about chemicals, what do you define chemicals? Is it just like anabolic steroids, or do you define chemicals that you can buy it over the counter? Like fat burners or things like that. Do you foresee that, or do you say that fat burners will be a chemical?
Okay, so defining PEDs or supplements, performance physique enhancing supplements. I think it honestly comes down to what the individual's intention is with using them. So when we're talking about PEDs, I think PEDs, you have these two umbrellas. You have your anabolics, so if listeners, viewers, if they follow my content, AAS, and then you have your non-AAS. And I'm referring to things that largely are things that you aren't going to find at a GNC or vitamin shop. You're going to have to source them, and hopefully you can go through a reputable source like maybe a clinic. But a lot of individuals are finding these drugs without prescriptions, just through word of mouth. Now, within these two umbrellas, the anabolics, those are the ones that I think we need to be really clear on the potential risk, the potential effects, because for women, there are effects that are irreversible.
Right.
And when we look at the non-androgenics, the non-anabolics, I mean, we've got things like GH, Clen, L-carnitine, which yes, you can buy that over the counter. You can buy it completely legally, but these are all things that can, yes, technically improve your look, improve the outcome you have from a physique standpoint, but you should still be informed, even if they don't carry that same risk of virilization. Just generally understanding, if you're putting it in your body, if you don't understand the potential drawbacks, I feel like it's a little naive, it's a little ignorant, and you have a responsibility, to yourself, regardless of where you are in your career, whether you're early on, you should understand the risk, assumed risk.
Yeah, so again, understanding, as Cory said, understanding the cause and effect makes a big difference. So if nowadays, if individual or athletes, they look for a trainer / coach, you want to make sure that you can find somebody that's experienced in not just training and nutrition, but it's going to come to a point where the decision, you're going to weigh out the decision whether you might go one step above and start taking maybe PEDs or something. But just remember that there's a lot of supplements you can buy at the GNC, for example, I consider that chemicals.
I do, and that's a good point, because there are things like SARMs that can be purchased, just a storefront, or there are different testosterone boosters, some less effective than others, but really when we look at the things that are going to be easiest to access, like SARMs, for instance, that's something that you can take orally, so you're not even having to go through the learning how to administer aspect of that. Those are very easy to access, very quick for individuals to reach for, and honestly, I think those carry much more of a risk, arguably much more of a systemic impact than anabolics do.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like, if in your opinion, you feel like finding the right trainer makes a big difference on if you're going to take it a step further in the fitness industry?
Totally. The supplementation side of things is something you can't really avoid at this point, even in the lower level divisions. And by lower level, I just mean lower muscularity requirement, lower conditioning requirements. So in bikini, honestly, on the men's side, like I empathize, because even in men's physique, I mean, the size, the conditioning that you need to be successful, even at an amateur level, I do think the baseline does require PEDs. I mean, there are some individuals who are able to make it pretty far, but when you're trying to take your physique to a national level, to a pro level, I think if you don't have someone in your corner to guide you safely, you're really setting yourself up for a rocky path.
I noticed that it's very easy to to get these PEDs or even over-the-counter things. There's a lot of online businesses, and it makes it so accessible. Before it's like you have to go to a doctor, or you have to go to black market and find the supplier. But now it's so easy to get anything you want, actually.
It is, and that's the scary part. Like what we were talking about yesterday, the growth in social media and even individuals talking about using PEDs, and a lot of individuals talking about using them not even for bodybuilding purposes, just to look better, just for summer. It's things like that oftentimes when that kind of content is consumed by a younger athlete, a younger viewer, it puts them in a position where they're like, okay, well, this must be what everyone's doing. So then if there's any interest to go into the sport of bodybuilding, it's kind of assumed. It's like, oh, well, that must be what everyone's doing, because these people look crazy. There's no way that they're doing it naturally. So if they're doing it, there's probably not a high risk. And I think that's where, especially on the female side, it's so far from the truth. And that's why you have a lot of these athletes who are running cycles, running very high dose, high risk cycles before they ever reach a competitive level, even nationally?
Yeah, so one of my questions to you at your seminar was, well, when I was on a cycle many years ago, I felt the best shape of my life. I was the most confident. I could train hard. I could build a lot of muscle. I can get much conditioned faster. I just felt so much better. And if you compare it to when I maybe came off, there's a big difference. So maybe I didn't know how to come off correctly, but I could tell when I was on some kind of enhancement, there's a big difference, not just physically, but mentally.
Totally, totally. Psychologically, I think, and I hesitate to use the word addictive, but I do think it's very hard to have the foresight to see that when you're on cycle, I mean, like I've used Anavar, I'm very open about that. It feels good. It makes training better. I like that look. But there are consequences as a female athlete who wants to be competitive in bikini, who wants to have a long career, wants to have healthy labs. I'm not going to be able to just use that indefinitely, as good as that might feel. So I think one, with your trainer, if you're with your coach trainer, you should have realistic expectations around what is the duration in which I should use these PEDs. And in this case, I'm talking mostly about anabolics, but even fat burners. I mean, clenbuterol, T4, T3. I mean, these are ones that I think can have a place and are indicated for the athlete who's getting on stage and doing everything that they need to do, in order to create that deficit, in order to get to where they want to be physique-wise. But there's still a cutoff to when you should have these in place. And I think a lot of coaches kind of fall into that trap of the client pushing, like, well, can't I just keep it in a little bit longer? Oh, I'm in my off season, but I want a mini cut. I want to feel a little tighter. I don't feel confident. Can't I put some clen in place? And I think that's where coaches, trainers need to have really strong spines around, hey, this is why we're using it. And they need to be able to educate. And I don't see as much of that happening as needed.
Yeah. How do you feel about social media playing a big part in someone's decision? Or I notice social media, whether it be Instagram or Facebook, sometimes a person can get too much into it, meaning you want to look like that person, but social media gives maybe not a perfect scenario. It shows only the best pictures. You might take 100 pictures, you put on the best one. So does it give a look where maybe it could not be attainable, but because they want that, they're always trying to push for more and more and more.
Totally. And I'll say just anecdotally from my experience, even now, even knowing what I know, I still look at these girls in bikini and I'm like, her glutes, they're insane. Like, she has so much projection, and there definitely is envy in that. Like, I mean, there's respect of like, wow, like I want my glutes to look like that. But even knowing what I know, I still have to check myself when I see these progress pictures, when I see these girls staying really lean year round, and when I see them doing, 10, 12 shows a year, it's like, well, there's a cost. And most people, it's understandable because we're human. We're not going to air out the negatives on social media. I mean, like I'm a very private person, and sure, I share a lot online, or so it seems. But even then, there are people that are online that are sharing just those highlight reels, just the benefits. And they're not, I mean, like if you've ever looked at someone, who their physique is amazing, but you don't see their labs, you don't, on the female side, you don't hear their voice. Obviously, anatomically, you're not going to have someone talk about changes that are occurring due to long use of anabolics.
Yeah. I mean, when I look at these reels, the feed on a lot of this athletes, it's just, sometimes I'm in awe.
Me too.
And even though, I'm past the stage of competing, it's just, I can understand where, if I feel this way, just take where a person much younger who's very competitive and want to be the best. Man, I mean, it's just, the decision making they make is like, snap on, they want to do it right away. And sometimes guys, they have the wrong concept, like more is better. More isn't always better.
No, and I think like a good analogy that I tend to break down for clients and consulting clients, it's like with Anavar, for instance. Like I have a lot of girls come to me, they're like, can I put in 10 milligrams of Anavar? That's what my coach recommends, I'm like, okay, but you've never used PEDs before. You want to start at 10 milligrams, which like objectively for bikini, that's a pretty high dose. I mean, the other divisions, okay, like you are accepting the risk, you're accepting using more drugs, but when you look at like that 10 milligrams of Anavar, you could use 2.5. You could use 5 milligrams. And each increment that you're skipping over, you're leaving progress on the table. You're just leapfrogging right over it. So like I've used 2.5, I've used 5. I'm telling you, like, yes, it helps with training, but there's not that big of a difference, particularly if you're using this in a prep, in a fat loss phase to enhance the physique, to just bring a fuller look. I mean, realistically, you're not gonna build. Like, you're not going to put on a meaningful amount of size. So it's like, if you wanna make that jump, you wanna go to 7.5, you wanna go to 10, 15, it's like, well, why wouldn't you capitalize on the, even if it's 1 or 2 pounds, the 1 or 2 pounds you can build at 2.5 milligrams a day. Then you max that out. Okay, then maybe you decide, I'm gonna use 5 milligrams a day. You build another couple pounds. And then if your physique needs more muscle, you've exploited every other avenue, all the other levers that you can. Maybe you do end up taking 10 at a point in your career, but if that's your starting point, I mean, no one I know is ever like, yeah, I started at 10, I'm gonna use less. Like, I'm gonna see what I can get out of it. That just, I know on the male side, that hardly, I imagine that doesn't happen, right?
Sometimes people talk about their cycle, especially men, and some of them are just ridiculous, crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because, I mean, I want to know, in your experience, being in the gym, being in the clinical setting of this, you see people come in, you see how they train, and you're like, they have a lot of things that could be better within their training. You start talking to them, I'm sure,
Yes.
while you're training them about their diet. And then it's like, wait, so you want to do the easy thing. You want to take the PEDs because quite literally, even injecting, that's the easy part of this. Everything else, the sleep, the fatigue management, the cardio, the dietary adherence, all of these things are levers that I feel like people are oftentimes skipping over. So then they go to the PEDs to compensate for that lack of progress. And I think when you do that early on, I mean, ultimately, you're missing out on progress that frankly could set you up for a better career.
Right, yeah. I see that a lot, yeah. From a guy's point of view, I notice, I've seen it all, almost all. But I notice women are almost the same way. They're thinking,
Yeah.
Because when I train a new client, I don't talk about PEDs or enhancements. I just train them the diet, nutrition, I just train them the way it's supposed to be. But then I know already sooner or later
They're gonna
start
ask.
looking around. They look at their social media or Instagram, and they're like they ask.
Yeah.
So if they do ask, that's the only time I usually say, well, I'm just going to give you information about it, and this is what's going to happen, or potentially this kind of negative and positives. But it's almost all the time, especially nowadays.
Yeah, and I'm sure they come to you and they're just like, well, can I sprinkle in a little of this? Will this help me in the gym? Will this help me lose a bit more fat? Mm-hmm. And that's the part, I mean, like really the question they're asking is, how do I get more progress? So I think as coaches, as trainers, it's our responsibility to say, okay, until everything else is maximized, we shouldn't go this route, because yes, that will augment what you're doing. It will help you, but it's only going to help a process that's already occurring. So let's say you have a girl who, she wants to build more muscle. She wants the glutes, she wants the legs, she wants that look, that very dense look, but she's not eating enough. She's always in the diet. She's yo-yoing back and forth. She's not training very hard. You're supposed to train with her 4 times a week. She only hits 2 sessions. She's always canceling. It's like, that needs to be addressed first. That needs to be taken care of, because the PEDs, you put them in, they're only going to help what you're already doing. And if you're not doing things correctly, well, they're kind of just in, but at what cost, right?
Yeah. I also notice nowadays, I guess in the 80s and 90s when I actually trained, some other things have evolved. The equipment has evolved. Nutrition has evolved. So like we use a lot of free weights, but nowadays we have a lot of machines. So yeah, it's good, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes with the free weights, your body responds better. Everybody's different, but that's what I feel. So people have to understand that the nutrition plays a big part, and then once you go into the enhancement, it plays a big part also. Yeah, so it's not like you take this and it's magic.
No, not at all. And I think what you can probably speak to, which, I mean, that is a huge asset for your clients, is you've been in the space, you've seen what it takes to build the muscle that you need to be competitive. But everyone develops that skill of their ability to progress their skill as an athlete at their own pace. And it is something that, like, early on, if you start fostering, if you start figuring out, okay, what is the bottleneck? What's the area of weakness? Are they coming in and doing the workout, but like they're only sticking to the machines that feel good or that give them a good pump? And it's not to say like don't look at sensation, but that's an area that I see on the female side is often overlooked. At least in the bikini side, I think a lot of trainers, they say, okay, I'll do training coaching for you. I'll do your training as well. I'll do your programming. And they just give them a split. They're just like, oh, glutes 3 days a week. Okay, train to failure, do 4 sets of 25. But it's very general, a very high volume, and ultimately that's going to dig you into this giant volume hole. And then once you're in prep, I mean, we do expect performance to go down in training. That's something that can result in injuries. It can result in stalled progress, or for the natural athlete, even muscle loss.
Yeah, exactly. Nowadays, I used to train a lot of, well, not me, but I still observe, not just in the fitness industry, but like football, for example.
Okay.
And so I dealt with some kids, and nowadays, if you look on a lot of the high school and college, they have trainers, yeah. But these guys are built. They train. They're ex-powerlifters, or they will be powerlifters, maybe bodybuilders, and they know all the functions of how to do, quick, how to enhance your quickness and stuff like that. They know about football training, but I've noticed a lot of times where the parents or even the kids will ask about stepping it up. So they always ask, the first question they ask is steroids.
That's so sad, because we're talking about young kids. I mean, sometimes they're just 18, 19. They've been training, like a few years. And even if, the output is really high, they're not really giving their body the ability to grow at the rate that it would naturally. What would you say, because I know a girl asked this yesterday, I know Maneka asked this yesterday at the seminar. Yeah. On the male side, what would you say is the earliest, even someone who's, competitive, like structurally, they're just built for that division. What's the earliest you would say it's maybe a discussion, maybe on the table to include enhancements?
It depends. I look at the person.
Okay.
I mean, how long has he's been training? Is his training consistent?
Yeah.
Does his body look mature enough already, or is he just starting off? You can tell.
Yeah.
So it depends, But if I do, I would always start with the nutrition, and then maybe once you maybe reach a plateau, maybe you can have a little enhancements.
Yeah.
Maybe you can try SARMs or something. Yeah. Or,
yeah. Do you find that a lot of athletes that you work with are pretty consistent with getting the lab work done?
No, because they don't know.
They don't realize.
Don't know. So that's one of the questions we ask. You gotta go get a physical first.
Yeah.
But I think they start off youngest because they get a lot of pressure because they want to get that scholarship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They see other people doing it. They see other people getting progress faster. And I think that often the assumption is, okay, this also applies to within bodybuilding. They want that progress sooner than they would get it otherwise. So the easy thing is to put the drugs in place, but they're not really thinking long term, okay, what does this look like from a health standpoint?
Exactly, because I had a client where she was all natural, and then she went to compete, and she got kind of outclassed. But it's like she wants to do the same thing.
Same thing. And it's like, okay, well, if you're going to do that as an amateur, what does that look like when you're a pro? What does that look like when you're starting off as a pro versus when you're a competitive pro, when you're wanting to excel your career? I think that's something on the female side people often overlook. They don't realize, okay, if you're going to be doing multiple cycles early on just to get that pro card, just to do, just to get first call outs at the national level, it's like, where does that leave you once you become a pro? Where does that leave you when you actually do need to have it in place?
And then again, going back to football, a lot of the kids, when they have the game, these guys are maybe, they don't know, but you can tell they got enhanced a little bit. Man, the hitting, the quickness, so much faster, so much stronger. You get hurt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're like, wow, they want to be like that because, they watch football on TV, maybe the parents persuade them or the friends, they see their friends, getting bigger, stronger. They want to be just like that. So it's very tempting, I think, for the high school or teenage person to go to the next level, especially nowadays, because now this generation nowadays a lot of social media, right?
Yeah, a lot of social media, a lot of individuals with big social media platforms who are talking about drugs very positively.
Right.
And I don't think that it's inherently a bad thing to talk about your use. I think that's helpful to be honest about it, but I think there's a responsibility in how you talk about PEDs, and that's something I have had some very low criticism on. I've had people say, well, it seems like Cory is just like demonizing PEDs, that, you know, at one point she was very pro, why is she like talking so negatively about them? And the reality is, I think a lot of people out there nowadays are only putting out the positives, and they're not talking about the very real, very assumed risk that come with PED use.
Yeah, because they're scared to talk about it.
I think it takes them acknowledging that maybe they haven't done things as safely as maybe they should have. Maybe they kind of knew, hey, well, I am taking more of a risk here. What is this going to look like in 5?
But again, is it nobody's business, right? But yours.
Right. And I do think that that's where people will make criticisms around top athletes and be like, well, why doesn't she talk about it? Why doesn't he? And ultimately, I don't think these athletes owe their following, their viewerships, anything, unless they're capitalizing on their physique in a very direct way, unless they're making money on, okay, I got these results, I built this muscle. In that case, when we have someone that's like claiming natural, when they're being very direct, like, oh, I haven't used anything, yet they're making money off of that belief, I think that's very unethical.
So, Cory, tell me, so we learn a lot about, you know, your how you feel about certain things. What do you plan for, you know, your YouTube or your career, and maybe further your career and maybe competing?
Yeah. So I do have aspirations to continue to compete. For anyone who's familiar with my background, I guess my competition career, I competed in 2022. I self-coached, and I had John Jewett as my second eye. I did very well. I've had a very objectively successful career on the pro stage, but realistically, to be competitive at this point, I do need more muscle. So right now I'm going through a build phase. It's very intentional, and I'd like to have that density so that when I do get on stage next, I can not just do well, not just, you know, I ideally place first call-outs. I'd like to win, and I mean, I think to do that, it means...
Well, you train to win, right?
What was that?
You train to win.
Yes.
Train to win,
oh,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's why I retired from professional bodybuilding, is because after 2 years, you know, I trained so hard, and I trained to win, but when I go to the contest, you know, when I used to compete, it was just one class.
Yeah.
There's no like 212s or whatever.
Yeah.
Just one class. So I competed against guys 100 pounds heavier than me.
Oh, wow.
So after a while, after 2 years of, you know, I only did it because I wanted to market myself in Asia.
Right.
But after a while, you know, the training, I was so competitive. I love competing that I go there. I was like, I know I'm gonna get first call-outs.
Yeah.
I'd be happy for maybe third call-outs.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the evolution of the size that is required, and I mean, I think in the male division that's evolved at an exponential rate. On the female side, I think that it's requiring a level of competition that isn't as easy as, you know, just entering a show and winning. I think you have to be very intentional with that. So that's what I'd like to do, but I don't want to get on stage until, you know, objectively I can look at myself and say, okay, there's a very good shot that you can win a pro show. So that is on the horizon, but I'm going to be patient. You know, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I do feel like it's making an impact and at least giving individuals the information that's not readily available. So giving them information around using things a little safer. And right now, what I'd like to do is utilize my experience using PEDs, share that with others, and hopefully guide them to make better decisions, or at least decisions that they understand fully.
So I watch all your podcasts, but tell me, what did you do what did you do before? What was your occupation?
So I've been...
Were you a trainer?
I've been coaching. I've been in the bodybuilding space since 2015, but I worked in social media marketing for a supplement company. It was my first sponsor, so I worked with them, transitioned into production, so content creation, but for athletes, so I was behind the lens. I worked for a few fitness apps, and from there I actually started nursing school. Went into nursing school. I just graduated in March. Originally the plan was to go bedside to, you know, get that field experience, but what I found is even while I was in nursing school, because the interesting part is I did think being in nursing school, I would probably discontinue coaching. I wasn't going to do it at the scale I'm doing it now. I really saw the progression in business and coaching and just the online reach, the influence there, take off really in the last 2 years. And it came down to sharing this kind of content. So right now, business is doing really well, and simply what I want to do is continue to get the information in front of more eyes and into more ears, and simultaneously, yes, compete, but I think that there's a value in putting this information out there. So in whatever means I have to do, really the last year, I've seen a lot of interest in promoters like yourself. Organizations have me out to speak to larger groups. What I'd like to do is really get into the sector, in the private sector medically. So looking at these telehealth clinics, looking at organizations that have, let's say, wellness specialists who are unlicensed, but are working with a high volume of individuals who are using these drugs, hopefully under the guidance of a licensed professional. But I still think that there's a very big disconnect in the private sector. So I'm hoping that in the next year or two, I can begin speaking in different industries that kind of cross over into fitness.
Oh, interesting. So I know, by talking to you, I know you know a lot, but do you feel like you're learning a lot of things as you go along, as the days, the weeks, the months go by?
Totally, yes. And I mean, like, there are aspects to bodybuilding that I understand very well. I'm very proficient in. But what it's really opened my eyes to in the last several years is that in healthcare and in the medical setting, there's a very big gap in professionals' understandings around female endocrinology. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed. But within that, I mean, that isn't my scope of practice for Gen Pop. I mean, like, my focus is very much around physique goals, performance goals related to individuals in and out of the sport. I think on the health and wellness side, those are always areas that I want to further my understanding, because I think that the use in and out of bodybuilding has direct carryover to an individual's long-term health. So always continuing to further my education and make sure that I really understand things front to back. But yeah, no, I learn stuff every single day, and those areas that get exposed to me that I realize, oh, I might not know this as well as maybe I thought I did. I enjoy that. I love that part of this so much.
Are you honest enough to tell somebody, I don't know?
Yes.
Okay,
oh
great.
yeah. I think there's a lot of people that make assumptions around my knowledge base, and there are very clear lines, at least in my mind, around the areas that I won't cross into, just because it's not my scope of practice. And frankly, like, what is my scope of practice? It shouldn't be this. It's kind of turned into this. So even within that realm, talking about PEDs, I try to be very transparent with clients up front. Like, you should listen to your doctor. You should not take medical advice from me, but I will share my knowledge with you. And if you want to do with that what you will, okay, that's fine.
Man, I tell you, this is so interesting. I can talk to Cory the whole day. But any last words?
I just want to thank you for having me out. I've really enjoyed this. It was such a pleasure to be at the seminar. It's such a pleasure to sit down and talk with you. Thank you for having me on the podcast. If viewers, listeners want to look at more of my content, they can find that at Cory_fit, so CoryFit.com. I do coaching and do consultations. So if someone already has a coach, they're happy with them, but they're like, hey, I would like just help with the PED stuff. I'd like help with the lab work. You bring your coach. We can do a consult, all three of us. I do that more than people think, where if there's a gap in what you need as a competitor, just contact me. We'll see what we can do.
So excellent. If anybody, I mean, I would recommend Cory any days. Yeah. Again, so informative. It's something that a individual athlete would need, to have somebody as a coach / trainer to know or experience, not just a knowledge, but experience the physical side, the training, but also the mental part, how to prepare, because she's been through contest prep too. So she knows it all. So she'll be the perfect candidate to look at. And yeah, please look at her content. It's very, very informative. Thank you. And I thank you for coming. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you so much.
Hope for the best in the future.
Oh, you as well.
Yeah. Okay.